You want to start? Give me the five of us to start.
Of the group.
Everybody's counting, but Brian's and the second group. Good to go. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. We need to do intros. Everybody know? I think we're good, right? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Is your second? Paul's got the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meetings are, the minutes are approved. I think we're starting with pre-K, or do you want to start with ELP? Pre-K, you ready then?
Pre-K. Either way, you're going to get stuck listening to me, so.
Strategy for getting through all this material tonight? It's a lot of stuff.
No questions is our strategy.
Well, there you go.
Whoa.
I guess we'll see. I do know, now that you brought that up, a number of people have constraints tonight. So
I actually have to leave at 5:30. So.
I think we should target 5:30 then. So as we pace ourselves, let's try to keep it on a 5:30 pace.
Okay.
All right, pre-K.
Okay, pre-K. So, Chris, you kind of asked us to come up with some recommendations for pre-K. So that's what this 2-page document will show you. So the first chart, I'm just trying to delineate. We have a smorgasbord of preschool opportunities in the district. So we have some half-day programs that are at some of our elementaries. We've got half-day programs that are currently at Wendell Johnson, which is at the U5. Half-day program at Wood, which is actually run through the neighborhood center. Full-day programs at Twain and Hills, which are run through us, but also the full-day part is paid for by Shared Visions. And then also a full-day program at Man, again, preschool run by us, and then parents are paying for the extended day at Man. Then we have some off-site partners who we pay for the preschool portion, but then the extended day is whatever the off-site partners provide. And those are at neighborhood centers, at Broadway and Pleasant Ridge, Stepping Stones and Candy Care. So we're left with several buildings here, Garner, Horn, Levy, Lincoln, Longfellow, Lucas, Wickham, and Weber, that do not currently have preschool. Although you'll see in our recommendations, we are recommending that Longfellow be added as a site next year, and that Weber be added a preschool site as well, which leaves us, I know Christian had asked about specifically title schools. Lucas would still be the only title school for that preschool program on site. So, over on the right-hand side, I've listed for you kind of what the classroom caps currently are. So currently in those half-day programs, we are capping the classrooms at 10 gen ed 5 specialized. So that shows you how many openings we have in each of those rooms, and then what our current enrollment is in each of those classrooms. So if you look at the bottom of that chart, you'll see that our totals for our programs, we have 435 gen ed slots with our current caps, and 151 special ed slots with our current caps. But currently we are filling those at 394 and 80. Does that make sense so far? All right. Questions? Okay. We do, so I'm getting to that. So our certified enrollment counts, just so you know, for the past 3 years, we've had our IEP students, our special ed students, average right around 75, 63, 65 IEP students a year. And then we've been able to find spots for right around 400 students a year. So that gets us to about 470-ish students per year that we're able to find spots for. Now the application process is a little varied depending on how the programs are run. So right now parents are applying directly to Twain, Hills, and Man for those full day programs. And they are applying directly to those off-site openings. But they apply online, and that's what we're going to talk about next. They apply online for our half-day programs. And our half-day programs for our gen ed students have 298 openings. So the gap, and this is Paul what you were asking, how many people are applying for those 298 openings? Well, in 15-16 we had 450 apply. Last year, this current year, we had 493 people apply for those 300 openings. So there's 293 almost students that we weren't able to give a spot to. This year, we're currently, the application process just opened 2 weeks ago,
February 8th.
February 8th. We're currently running 60 apps ahead of where we were at this time last year, so we anticipate probably hitting that 493 like we did last year, probably surpassing that for applications. And this is kind of, I give you the numbers of where those applications are sitting right now, but we're only 2 weeks into it. So we have families that get on board. I think Penn had like 40-some apps in the first 10 minutes. And then we have families that kind of tend to trickle in as we go throughout the spring, throughout the summer, and then quite a few we kind of encourage to them maybe in August, maybe I should get my kid signed up for preschool. And they make the application then. And even throughout the school year as well. So really what we're looking at is at least a 200 student gap in what we currently are able to provide and the applications that we receive. And that doesn't even count the 400 kids who are either going to a private school or aren't even applying. Because we get an average of 1,100 kids coming into kindergarten. So to try to address at least the 200 kids who are applying that we aren't giving us a slot to, we have some recommendations here. So our first one is to obviously add programs where we can. Space is a limiting factor. We'd like to add them in all the buildings, but lots of buildings are telling us I don't have the room to put them in, but we know that we can add some programs somewhere. So the first thing we'd like to do is we've got 2 programs, 2 rooms or 4 classrooms that are run currently at Wendell Johnson, and we're going to move those to Longfellow, which is next year going to be at the new. Currently, 3 of those half-day programs are only special ed, and we're going to open up at least 2 of those to include gen ed students as well. It makes sense to leave 2, and they're the only 2 in the district, as only special ed preschool programs for those students that really have significant needs. So that adds at least 1 half-day classroom that is open to general ed students. And then we're also going to add at least 1 room at Weber, which again is 2 half-day classrooms. So those are little steps. Where we can get a little bit bigger step is if we reduce the special ed, what we kind of call reserve spots, from 5 to 3. So right now, every classroom we hold 5 spots for special ed students. We aren't filling those. With that 5 spots, we have 151 spots for special ed kids, and we're averaging about 75. So we're only filling about half of those. So instead of reserving 5 spots for our special ed students, we'd like to reserve just 3. So right away, we're opening up 2 more spots in every classroom for gen ed, which helps.
Can I chime in with a quick question /
Yes.
suggestion? Would there be a way to do that where you could sort of hold those 5 spots for a limited time, and then if they're not filled, you could say, okay, so it looks like we're not using them, we'll open them up to 2 of them up to non-special ed students?
We have done that in certain situations, but I will tell you that once you tell a family no, we don't have a spot for them, they're going to look elsewhere. They're either going to find a preschool elsewhere. And that's why we still, when you look at our numbers, it looks like we have openings right now, even though we turned probably 200 people down at some point during this fall. We have openings because once we turn them down, they find other places, or they say, you know what, we're good, we're just going to stay home. So there is a negative to
And moving to the 3 versus the 5, actually, when we looked at the table below, is going to show how many spots are truly open. We're actually not reducing the number of special ed spots in the long run.
Well, we would still have 94 spots open for the 75 or so students that we have. So we think we have enough of a cushion to be able to allow a spot for everyone.
And is it first come, first served?
And
Is that why
preschool
the 10 people are lined up
You
10
betcha.
minutes in?
And it's first come, first served for their choice. So if they get there first, they'll probably pick in Penn. But when Penn's filled, they have a second choice and a third choice offering too.
So so we've got 50 so far for Penn.
Right?
For what, 40 slots? Is it
Well,
one
for gen
classroom?
ed, currently right now, they only have 2 programs. So right now, with a 10 cap on each program for gen ed, it's only 20 slots.
Is it just just morning?
A morning and an afternoon.
Oh, 'cause it's
10 in the morning,
Okay.
10 in the afternoon for gen ed.
So, do those families tend to jump into other programs then? Or are they tending to,
Some do, some don't. right?
Most of the families that pick Penn as their first preference, pick Van Allen as their second preference. But as you can see, Van Allen is also pretty high on that number as well, so usually they don't get their second preference either, and then it's kind of seeing where slots are open, but, you know, we send out confirmation letters to families in the next couple of weeks once we get this all sorted out. So a lot of those families that maybe didn't get their first or second preference, they were saying might jump ship and go find and not kind of wait to see where those things might be.
My concern would be if they're then jumping into programs that potentially would serve kids that otherwise won't get any preschool. You know, because they're quick on the ball, you know, whereas Kirkwood, families show up in August, you know, and
We know that Kirkwood number's really low, but we also know that's kind of been the trend the last few years, and then come August, they're full,
Exactly.
and we don't like to give those spots away to,
so do you hold on to them?
we try to, just because we know that we haven't had a problem filling those when we get through the summer.
So you don't necessarily let somebody else just slide into that spot. I appreciate that.
Yes.
It's such a hard balance though, because if we wait, knowing the numbers are gonna come, how long do we wait? And because we're turning away parents too that are gonna come and wanna go to a different building, so it's a gamble.
Some parents are pretty, you know, they're particular about the buildings they want. So even though this year, like Dan said, we still have some openings, like in Hoover, we have some openings currently. And we have families on the waiting list like one in Central. Obviously, they don't make that drive. So we have families on the waiting list at one building, but we don't have a spot in another building. Logistically,
And there's no kind of priority given to, I mean, were you even asked about their financial status?
yeah, we do. You know, we don't have the free and reduced lunch data on those kids because we don't serve lunch, so they don't fill that out. But on the application, they can indicate if they receive any financial services like free and reduced lunch, WIC, Hawkeye Insurance is on there, food stamps is on there, so they can indicate that. And then we do take that into consideration. So we've kind of said in the past that 20% of our spots will hold for families that qualify for that.
So you do sort of, it's not just totally first come, first served.
Last year we ended up with about 39% total.
You do try and prioritize those. Okay.
So since we're into discussion, if we said, you know, there's never going to be a wait list at our schools with opportunity, what would that look like or go? What would change?
Well, we have to have more spots at every school. Definitely. So we either say, through these recommendations, and I can go through the next couple too, we can actually get enough spots in the district for all of our applicants, but it still may not be in their home school.
Well, if
or
we picked
in
our
their preferred
six schools with the highest opportunity, there's not going to be a wait list go. What would that look like?
Say that again. 6 schools, the Title I schools are you talking about?
Well, our schools with opportunity.
The opportunity gaps? Yep. What we would need to do is find more capacity at those buildings. We probably need to get
Could
at
be
least
neighboring buildings
2
too, but-
classrooms at each of those buildings. And the problem with that is because of the brand model, we've already added additional classrooms at a lot of those buildings, so they're already at capacity.
Yeah, it could be that maybe it's not at the school, right? Maybe it's in the area.
Maybe in the area.
Have you looked at that?
As far as trying to find empty classrooms around the district, there just aren't many.
Oh, and I guess I was referring to not a district building. just
Other partner
renting space
sites.
somewhere.
The other thing we could consider is seeking out other community partners, those partnerships.
And you have looked at more partnerships.
We have, tricky part with adding programs is our funding, like everybody else's funding, is a year to year, so we don't get the funding. If we open up a community partner site, we have to fund that teacher and that para and those students' tuition. We have to make sure we have that funding from the previous year. So it can be done for sure. To be a little creative about how we go about doing that. Problem with community partners is they have to meet the same criteria that we do in the district as far as they have to have a certified teacher. And so we lost a community partner a couple of years ago because their teacher quit. And they couldn't find a certified teacher because they can only pay, in a private preschool, they're only paying, $14 an hour. And the certified teacher's not going to take that kind of job usually, so that's become a challenge with community partners on board.
So how about this? Let's finish your reco, and
Okay.
I think you get the theme. Maybe we can talk about Going forward, what's the,
And I just wanted to point out that if we would have reduced those reserve spots from 5 to 3 this year, we would have had 2 situations right now that there's a program in Corval Central and at Kirkwood that currently are serving 7 special education students. And putting a 3 and 3 cap morning and afternoon, I would have had to have 2 kids move to a different site. So
and you wouldn't just slide the one in?
we did this year.
All right.
I mean, because our cap is 5, so we didn't really have
I
to
know,
slide in,
but
but we could.
can you
And we
do
have
it?
done that in
Yeah.
other situations as well. Hills is a good example. They really are, they're a shared vision
Their shared vision
program,
program.
which is really supposed to take Gen Ed, and we were able to slide in a special ed student in that one because of locations, which just didn't make sense to try to transport that student to different programs. So we are able to be creative where we need to be. So reducing the reserve spots is one way. Obviously, creating more classrooms is another way. But then we could also consider increasing the cap. So the cap of 10 and 5 that we currently have is self-imposed. The state says that we can go up to 20 for a maximum for a preschool classroom, as long as there's the physical space. They have a physical requirement of 35 square feet per student. So we can do that, and the state says we have to have at least a 1 adult per 10 student ratio. We currently do, and all of our preschools have 1 teacher and 1 paraeducator. So we could increase the cap, and I've given you a chart there below to kind of show that as you increase the cap from what we currently have, the 10 and 5, and this is assuming the new classrooms are in there already, the ones at Weber and the ones at Lincoln and Hoover, that we could get a Gen Ed increase. If you went all the way to 20, you could get a 196 student increase over the current cap that we have. And then we would certainly recommend that as that numbers increase in the classrooms, that we would consider then adding a second paraeducator for those classrooms. And then I also gave you some data there at the bottom that kind of says how some of the other UEN districts are staffing their preschool classrooms.
So like Marshalltown, does that mean it's a teacher plus 2 paraeducators, or it's just
Yes,
parents?
yes, a
Okay.
teacher plus 2.
And when you made your statement before, if you had 20, you'd have what staffing?
You absolutely need to have 2 adults, so 1 teacher, 1 para.
Okay.
What I'm recommending is if it's, we would have to look at if it's 20 Gen Ed students, you might be able to get by with that. Once you start adding some special needs students, and you're talking about that teacher having 20 students in the morning and 20 students in the afternoon. So 40, reports they're managing, 40 sets of parents, 40, individual differences of students. And then if you've got, let's say, 3 IEP students in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, now you've got 6 IEPs that teacher is managing. Because all of our teachers are rule certified. So they're certified in regular and special education. So they are managing the IEPs of all of their students as well. We don't have an additional teacher coming in to serve those.
So maybe this is a dumb question, but if you have a 10-to-1 ratio with the teacher, why wouldn't you add another teacher and be 20 to 2?
10 to 1 adult. It's adult.
No, I know, but
Okay.
you're 10-to-1 with the teacher, aren't you? No?
What's
The requirement is
two?
a adult to student ratio is 10 to 1. So a teacher and para can work with 20 students.
How
So
much
you're
you
saying why not 2 teachers
Yeah.
instead of a teacher and 2 pairs?
That model wouldn't afford it.
Financially, right?
So it doesn't fully fund.
Right. So
Right.
even going with your caps and increasing, that's going to generate additional funding for us at that 0.5 level. So those additional dollars are where we need to consider, at what point do we add a para back to the room? But I think what's interesting to note is, as we've gone out and surveyed some of these other UEN districts, Cedar Rapids is moved from a 13 and 5 model with 2 paraeducators to something that they, I think, would describe as a more expensive model. Now they have 2 classrooms, so 4 sections, and they're serving 15 and 5 in each of those sections. So over the course of the day, 30 Gen Ed students and 10 IEP students. So they do that. So that equates to, across both classrooms, 20 IEP students. But then they hire a multi-cap special education teacher over here who is serving the 20 IEPs. They describe that as a more expensive model. They're in year 1 of trying to implement that. So you can see that what they did in years prior is a lot more like what we're discussing or attempting right now. I think for us it's going to be looking at what those additional funds generate, and then at what point do we add the para? We've got some kiddos coming in that are special ed that already have a para attached to them as well, so you have to think about the number of adults in the room that way.
So just to be clear, your recommendation is to do this.
Yes.
All right?
Does the increase, if you were to increase it like that, does it have kind of externalities on the general fund and on the principal's time and
Putting more students in the building,
yeah,
definitely.
you know, I
Definitely
mean,
secretary
is there a limit to
time.
what you can do with that?
It's probably a good question, but, you know, I think all of our buildings have a variety of student ratios that are currently in them, so you're talking another 20 kids, possibly 15 kids. I don't know if that's gonna be a measurable impact.
So this would be a breakthrough in capacity.
It would, like, you know, if we went to 20, and again, we're not sure. We think that in the North Liberty and the Corville area where there are a lot of applications, that we could hit that 20 in those classrooms. In some of the other schools, we don't know that we would hit that 20 cap. And we probably, you know, like Jay said, aren't gonna have a ton of people wanting to move from a north end to a south end or a south end to a north end. So, but we think that we could do a much better job at saying yes to anyone who applies
So
as
what-
opposed to saying no.
So what do you need from us?
Do it again?
What do you need from us?
Approval. I guess blessings to move ahead to this process and support as, you know, people come forward with any kinds of concerns that they might have. Anytime you're increasing class sizes, you know you're going to be concerned about that.
Personally,
But-
I'd do it. I understand you're increasing class size, but you're increasing the service too. So is it better to have a slightly less service or not have any at all? I don't know.
I worry about 200 kids sitting at home not getting preschool.
I'd do it, so I'm good.
Can we do some modified weighted resource allocation model stuff in some of the schools? So that maybe you don't have a 20 cap and some of the schools where that would not be ideal. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying, so we could have a lower cap.
Lower cap or
Again,
high-
our problem is that just another barrier that you might be putting in that school. So
Lower-
take a school with high FRL, and we have a lower cap, now all of a sudden they have fewer spots, and now we're asking that parent to transport their child.
Or
Well, it goes.
or staff it appropriately.
Right, exactly.
Why would we do that?
If it is 10 or 15, you have definitely the extra pair, or maybe 2 pairs,
Certainly.
that type of a thing. You know, where the need arises.
And why are we preventing less kids from getting going and low at school?
Why would we?
Yeah.
If we have a cap, a low cap, there just isn't room. So
Right, I'm
I'm
saying-
advocating increasing the cap to the max.
Right, that's why I was just
Okay,
asking
I'm sorry.
board members why we would want to have less kids who need it the most. I just know that preschool is a huge piece for them to being able to go into kindergarten and first grade, so wouldn't we want to have?
Yeah, and it
More
would take care of
space
it by
there.
adding more staff. I mean,
Well,
that's
and you-
still
and
weighted
you might have
resource.
missed, but we were talking about definitely at our highest opportunity schools, we need to meet the need. And
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I think it was just
when
trying to, I think the question was, would you be able to reflect what you did with lower class sizes in some of those higher opportunity buildings? So I'm trying to mirror that, but the trade-off right then, the cost is, well, then you maybe wouldn't be serving as many kids if you tried to do the lower class size. But I think that was, I don't want to
Yeah,
put words in
and-
your mouth, but I think that's what Lori was saying was,
Yeah.
can you make it reflect what you did with lower class sizes in some of those buildings earlier in the year?
Yeah,
And if we just add more staff, it's the same concept. That's why I said modified weighted
Yeah.
resource. What could we do that would be modified to fit that same model?
And I'm saying from a weighted resource model that makes sense in a full day. We're talking about 2.5 hours. And for 2.5 hours, I don't care what your income is, at 4 years old, that's still gonna be beneficial to you. And so I think it's a disservice to those schools that have more opportunities to cap it at a smaller number, knowing that they have a greater need. Not just bodies, but need in general to be able to catch up. You guys showed us all this data about if you go to the preschool that you're better and you're
awesome.
ready. So I'm just saying from that philosophical standpoint, we should have more classes there in preschool because those are the kids. When we're looking at the kids that didn't, I mean, have y'all looked at the kids who didn't? Where do they fall in that spectrum of when we're talking about the kids that are in need of opportunities. So I'm just saying, it just makes more sense that those classes of anything, yes, there's a need in our north area, but as far as academically being able to catch up, if we're assuming, we're making some assumptions that you ain't got no money, you must not be as smart. I'm being sarcastic there, but I'm just saying, like, then they should definitely have 20, or if we have space to do more, then we should do more, classes in those
But
schools.
that does depend on the availability of staffing, right? I mean, it would be a harder choice if you had to choose between capping it or having really high teacher-student ratios.
Well,
That's
we can't
not what
go
we
over
want
20
either,
anyways
right?
because of state law. I'm just
Right.
saying, like, it doesn't make sense to do only 18 versus those other schools get
To
20
20.
when we
Yeah.
know that we got
No, I'm with you on
kids
that, but
who-
bringing down the teacher-student ratio would be good. If we
Let
can
me
do
try
it with
this.
funding.
Is anybody not aligned to these recommendations?
I don't know yet.
I'm not sure I fully understand the impact on the general fund, if any, because, you know, it does say briefly in this Q&A, the district uses general fund monies to support these programs. I don't fully understand the funding. I mean, as long as it's paid for, I don't see why we shouldn't try to find a way to do it.
So we get 50% of the district allotment for people. We get 50% for every preschool. So the more student enrollments we get, the more money that we get.
Right, but does any of it then come out of the general fund? Yeah,
I
okay.
don't know why it says that though.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to make of that line.
But, well, your district cost per pupil all goes into the general fund, right? It's all the general fund. It goes right into the general fund.
It's dumped into that bucket.
It's via the general fund, but it's not taken away from
Kind
it.
of pass-through-ish.
No, it goes into the general fund and then the expenses come out of the general fund. So if you can run your program less expensively, you can spend those dollars on something else.
So we've been poking around this.
Expensively.
We've been poking around this for years. This is the best recommendation I've ever seen. It's awesome. It's actually a breakthrough.
And then once we get all those in, then we have to start thinking about where are those 400 kids that we're not even getting applications from. That would be the next step.
Well, and again, let's prioritize our school with the biggest opportunity to, we got to meet those needs, period, right? I mean,
I still think that's a community discussion, pulling those folks in. Because that's an emergency need, right? That's a lifelong skill thing about how do we bring those other folks that are providing preschool. Because I've talked to some of the places, because I'm in that market right now with preschool for my own kids, and some of them have polls where they are looking for students. Some people are talking about closing because they don't have enough students. So I'm going, if we have 400 kids that aren't getting any preschool, and then we got all these preschools that don't have any kids, can we get together, have a conversation in the district talking to some of these other folks about how we can fill some of that space or something? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to figure that out because that's what I'm hearing. I'm like, well, we're actually short 10 students this year. And if we have 400 kids almost every year, is there a way that we can partner or something so that those kids will get preschool?
anything else on this topic? This meeting's already exceeded expectations.
Oh, good. Everybody can go home.
That's a good start. Ready for next topic? All right, next topic is curriculum review, ELP.
So every 8 years, every curriculum subject goes through a review process. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little quick overview of the review process. And then Kathy Jepson, who is our curriculum coordinator for the ELP program, is here to give you a few more details about it. Our curriculum review process is really kind of a 3-phase process. The first year is spent in data collection, and typically that involves a survey of students, of staff, and of parents. So we collect that information. We also look at any other kind of data. We could look at achievement data. Obviously in ELP, we're looking at demographics of who is in our ELP program. So that was one huge piece of data that we brought together. Secondly, then we create a committee, and the committee is made of parents and staff members and a board member. So Chris joined our committee, and community representatives and administrators on our committee. And at the last meeting that Chris was at, he suggested that instead of us coming to you at the end of the review process in the fall telling you what we decided, maybe it would be a good idea for us to come to you midway through the process to tell you what we're thinking. So to get your input a little bit earlier on. So that's why we're here tonight. So we have the committee, and the committee is really charged with looking at all of our data, coming up with our strengths and our limitations of the program. So Kathy's included a document in the board docs that lists a draft of that. Right now, we're still in the process of kind of tweaking that. But a draft of our strengths and limitations. And then that third part of the review process is really to come up with an improvement plan. And the plan isn't necessarily to get completed during this review year. It's really to create a plan that we work on now for the next 6 years until our review process comes up again. So we've got a draft of the improvement plan as well, and I know Kathy's going to address kind of the major rocks that we uncovered and the things that we're grappling with right now as we try to make improvements to our ELP program. Kathy.
And I'm Kathy Jepson, the ELP coordinator. As Diane pointed out, we have this process in place. Currently, as I look at what we have on the improvement plan, there are 3 or 4 main things that we'll be addressing. One of those would be staffing needs. So on the overview that we provided for you, we've outlined what we're doing right now. We have services from kindergarten through grade 12, and there are different types of services at elementary, at junior high, and at senior high. The chart showing the units of study that you see here between grades kindergarten through 8 were all developed by ELP staff in accordance with the Iowa City curriculum writing process. We have a few commercial products that we have built upon those commercial products to differentiate them for high-ability learners, but almost all of those were created by our staff. The latter part of this, the second part in this area, shows the change from the previous curriculum review in 2007, 2008, where we had 9.29 FTE, 582 students served in 6 grades. Currently this year we have 12.92 FTE staff. We've increased to 1,621 students served throughout all grades. So you can see that we've more than doubled the number of students that we're serving, but our staffing needs are lagging. So that's a real challenge that we face. The second major focus of our improvement plan would be to expand our services to serve more diverse populations at all grade levels. We are looking at the needs of English language learners, and I included to you for the meeting a copy of the LAU plan that have been implemented this year at the state level, and it does include a requirement to address the needs of ELLs in terms of gifted services. We're looking at first exceptional needs, we're looking at various ethnicities, we're looking at differentiating our services, we're also looking at ways to expand our identification processes so we can find more students with special needs in terms of high ability needs, and then how to address those needs within our programming. Another thing that's come through from our improvement plan is the need for professional development. Professional development among ELP staff, and especially in the gen ed staff, with instructional staff in the buildings, the administrators, just having time to share information about the needs of gifted students, the diverse needs of gifted students, and how to have time within the current PD schedule to do that. Both Amber Robinson and Diane Schumacher are the administrators helping to guide this. Kingsley has been involved with a lot of conversations about serving the needs of diverse students. So with that overview, I would like to point out that, to my knowledge, ELP is the only department in the district that identifies all of its own students and creates almost all of its own curriculum. So it's a pretty big job for the students that we have, as well as the staff that we're working with. And Chris, I heard you ask at the end of the last presentation, what does this department need from the board? And I would say that if you look at the sheet for strengths and limitations, at the very end, it is a request for the process to be supported through the district. I think it's not just ELP, but sometimes we feel like we go through quite a bit of depth in our process to identify our strengths and limitations and create an improvement plan, but then sometimes those fall by the wayside over the years, and not all of them receive the support to implement them. And I know that the support also depends on a lot of external factors that we don't have control of. So That would be my overview. And if there's anything that I can answer, that the team can answer, we'd be most open to answering your questions.
I do want to point out, when you asked about funding before, you know, the more preschool kids we identify, the more funding we get. The more special ed students we identify, the more funding we get. ELP is not that way. We get funding just based on our total population of students. So if we get the same amount whether we identify 2% or whether we identify 20%. That amount of funding has to be used just for our identified population. So that's a struggle, because in Iowa City we have a lot of students who meet our current criteria for gifted education. So we have a lot of needs out there. The concern that we're looking at when we look at that population of students that have been identified, it's very disproportionate in compared to our general population. So we're struggling now with how do we continue to honor the giftedness of the students who've been identified through our current process, but what of the process, I guess, is preventing some of our other students from accessing these services. And so how do we change that process in order to get better representation of the students who need those services included in the identification process?
Plus, there's always going to be kids who aren't in ELP. Even if we succeed in identifying all kinds of kids who can benefit from it, most kids are probably not going to be in ELP, right? So if we're giving more money to ELP, we're kind of taking money away from everybody else. I mean, I just have this 1.1% figure hanging over my head, you know, when I hear these things. When you do ELP, I mean, sometimes when I look at the ELP, there's stuff that my kids have done in school. It looked great, it looked like a lot of fun. And it didn't seem to me like, it seemed to me like some of it every kid would benefit from, you know? Is it by definition not count as ELP if you provide it beyond just the group that's identified as as gifted and talented?
I mean, certainly we can provide differentiated experiences, and we can challenge our students within the general ed classroom.
But that wouldn't count as fulfilling our obligation.
Counted, they need to be, what's the term, Kathy? I can't remember, but substantially differentiated. Has to be.
Iowa Code says that gifted services must supplement, not supplant, gen ed services.
And qualitatively different
It's like
from
an
other
extra
programs.
scoop ice cream analogy.
But-
Right? I mean, so everybody gets one scoop, but if they're identified, they need to have that extra.
Yeah, but for example, my kids did the mock trial thing in ELP. It was really good. They enjoyed it. If we gave that to everybody, that wouldn't count as ELP anymore.
Correct.
It's kind of weird. It'd be the same experience potentially for those kids.
And it's not so much an end product that students produce or participate in, it's the thinking processes that go into the learning along the way. So what we try to do with our units study is to address the higher level thinking skills. Analytical thinking is a big part of the logic, for instance.
The critical thinking.
Analytical, critical thinking, right.
What's the process for parents to advocate for their?
When we have a screening period, depending on where we are with our levels of students, we do have an opportunity for parents to ask their child to be included in the screening process. There's some changes in the last couple of years at the primary grades, kindergarten, first and second, where instead of hard and fast identification, all of our teachers are going into the classroom doing in-class lessons based on research process, and then collaborating with the classroom teacher to identify students who exhibit certain traits. The first trimester is nonverbal creative skills, the second trimester is language arts and verbal skills, and the final trimester is analytical and math skills. And then those children receive talent. It's kind of a talent development process where they receive some enrichment with the teacher. So if a parent has a conversation with the classroom teacher, my child needs this, we certainly include all children in that process. And then if need be, have a conversation with the parent about that. Then when students reach second grade, this year for the first time, we're implementing a universal screening process. So all students will take that in the second grade. And then beginning in third grade, we actually invite parents to nominate their child for screening. And we provide that information through school newsletters, and we include 5 additional languages besides English. They're the most predominant other languages that are spoken in the district.
And what happens if a family moves here and they're in 7th grade?
7th grade is a strand within Literacy 7, and that That option was created because of the rather restricted schedule that students have in 7th grade for additional courses beyond the required. So that takes place whenever the student, if a student moves in, one of the first things could be a request from a parent, which we occasionally do get, or the Literacy 7 teacher notices that a student is exhibiting some really strong skills. And so that's, as students move in, it can be an as-needed basis.
Could you guys talk through that diversification piece a little bit as far as what are some of the issues the teams talked about and struggled with trying to say, okay, how could we increase broader representation across subgroups to that? Just from some of the conversations I know we've had that might be helpful for these guys.
It really starts with the requirements in Iowa Code. Iowa Code says that to identify students, there has to be a use of objective criteria and subjective criteria. That each district can determine what that might be. In our district, we've used the Cognitive Abilities Test, which is a test of reasoning ability. It's not an IQ test, but it was developed by a team of researchers. In fact, David Woolman at the University of Iowa was one of the original authors of that. And we also use the Iowa Achievement Assessments. What we're looking toward is less reliance on composite total scores and more reliance on subtest scores. So we would look at strengths in various areas, perhaps in addition to strengths across the board. And then subjective criteria come into play with getting information from parents, strong reliance on information from classroom teachers. And we're really in the process now with the curriculum review process of looking how we can expand the subjective criteria to include, for instance, with English language learners, it's required that they be assessed with non-language reliant assessments. So a nonverbal portion of the cognitive abilities test, for instance, might be there. Alternative assessments are there. The Naglieri nonverbal assessment we have not used in the past, but it is an option to include in the future. So it's a piece, again, a blend of objective and subjective criteria. There's also a clause in Iowa Code that talks about what happens with large numbers of students. Chris, you were talking about would it be good for everyone. On the third page, it's not up there, the third page of the Iowa Code that I provided to you has a clause that says, in the event that the number of eligible students exceeds the available openings, participants can be selected according to the extent to which they can benefit from the program. That's rather vague, but it also goes back to what Diane was saying, that when we have limited funds, we have a small number of FTE, then it becomes a matter of how can we provide services. It goes back to looking at who needs services and what kind of services do they need. So right now we're kind of in the midst of really delving into what other assessment pieces can we bring into this process.
Would you ever find yourself in a position where a teacher strongly recommends a student be an ELP, but you decide, well, but the test scores don't merit it?
There is also a clause in Iowa Code that says no one piece of information can exclude a child from services. So we wouldn't look at just a strong recommendation to the exclusion of everything else. It would need to be supported either pro or con by a multitude of pieces of data.
Yeah, and along that lines, I mean, I'm assuming we have a portfolio of works, not just test scores.
That is actually one of the recommendations that is going to be in the new piece of information.
Okay, because, we can historically look at a lot of brilliant people that would not have early on been identified that way because they didn't test well, they didn't have that, but their portfolio of work might have shown that there's some gifts there that need to be developed.
Especially in the case of a student who might be twice exceptional, gifted with a learning disability, something to that effect. And then it's more than just a portfolio. There needs to be a rubric for evaluating the portfolio based on some of the traits of giftedness.
Would two or three different teacher recommendations count as multiple measures, or?
What we have done in some cases is look at current information and previous year's information, because sometimes there is a change in a child's learning needs. There might be a diagnosed learning disability that's come in a more current year that we didn't have in the previous year. So there's no one piece of anything. It's more of a broader picture that we're looking at. And also, when we look at needs, there are different needs for different students depending on their peers. If they're in a peer setting with a lot of high ability students, then the differentiation in the classroom might already be a piece that's in place. And in other schools where there might be more discrepancies between high and low achieving students, the need could be more pronounced, but it could be a different kind of need also.
So we are exploring a couple models that have been successful with some other schools, and currently we use really criteria and we apply that across the district. So we do have some pockets where we can have a classroom where half of the kids in the classroom are identified as gifted, and we can have other classrooms where no one has been identified as gifted, or grade levels in buildings where no one's been identified. So we've talked about the possibility of exploring the idea of building norms. Would it make sense that it would depend on who you're sitting around, and if you're in a classroom with a lot of high achieving kids, chances are you are getting enriched on a day-by-day basis because the teacher is teaching to that group of students. Where if you're in a classroom of students who are struggling and you happen to be a standout, maybe you need to be identified as needing the service. That's one model. We're also looking at a model where we look at subgroup populations. So right now, our numbers, again, are very disproportionate. So do we need to look at among subgroups and selecting the students who are kind of outliers in their subgroups, who maybe didn't meet the district-wide criteria or overall, but are obviously high achievers within their subgroup.
And
So both of those models can be controversial and have pros and cons, but those are some things we're exploring. Sorry, Amber,
And
go
that's
ahead.
where we would need the most support, because when we talk about identifying kids who are typically not identified, that's where we would need the support of the board. Waterloo actually uses that model where they look at the entire district population. They, as a guideline, use 8 to 10% or identify 8 to 10% of each subgroup or the outliers in that subgroup. So while I appreciate the district making a stance on equity, if we're looking at how to be more equitable in identifying and meeting the needs of students who typically would not identify, using multiple criteria, not just the test scores, but using a wide range of identifiers. You mentioned the Neglieri, the nonverbal assessments, because we know some of our students of color, where language is a barrier, tend to do or perform very well on nonverbal or non-language dependent assessments. So that's where we would need the board support, because we know when we start swatting this hornet's nest, it's going to probably stir up some feelings. Also, the professional development piece is going to be huge for our teachers, because our teachers currently tend to recommend high achieving gifted, and that is one of only many forms of giftedness. But we tend to cater to that particular gifted, the high achieving. We tend to identify the high achiever because they are the ones that stand out. So we would definitely need your support as we move to more equitable practices in identifying gifted students in our district.
You know, I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of, you know, if we can find ways to identify people who aren't currently being identified who could benefit from this, and if that means rebalancing sort of who we can serve and who we can't. I guess I do feel ambivalent about the recommendation to the extent that they basically are asking for more resources, you know, because again, right now we don't have any more resources. And I'm having a little bit of the same reaction I had last week at the board meeting when we talked about college readiness, and the thing that was given to us along with it was about finding ways to get more kids who don't usually get identified, get them into AP classes. And that's a worthy goal, but I kind of feel like at some point we've got to prioritize the kids who just aren't going to be in an AP class, or aren't going to be in the gifted and talented, you know, who are probably always going to be the majority, right? Because that's, think of the other ones as being sort of the exception to the rule. And at some point, you know, it seems like every time we talk about these issues of academic achievement, we end up talking about placing people in advanced classes instead of prioritizing, you know, helping the kids who, I mean, we saw the number, 15% are taking remedial courses when they go to college, and that's defined very narrowly. people not finishing the degrees. So to the extent that we have to think about where to put resources, kind of thinking maybe, we're going to tell everybody we don't have as many resources as you would like, But, so that's just my reaction to both of those discussions. I'm going to have to run about 5 minutes. It's interesting, this kind of is related in a way to the next topic, but I'm going to have to miss out on some of that.
I'd like to get to the next topic, if we could. So, I'd like to thank Kathy. So I'm the board member on the team, right? So I want to thank Kathy, Diane, and Amber. I think the leadership's been excellent. The team is amazing. I just tried to hold, stay above water with this team because it's like a bunch of experts, right? Everybody knows what they're talking about. And so it's an amazing team. So, and we look forward to your final recommendations. I think you've kind of got a feel where we're at. We don't mind making the tough decisions either. So we don't mind whacking the hornet's nest when we can link the strategic plan and what we're doing and all the goals and academic outcomes. So go for it. We'll need to talk to constraints in the end. Who knows, we may get extra flexibility as this session goes on too, which may give us some options on how we do things. So, but anyway, I want to stop with thank you and we look forward to final recommendations. So.
Chris, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
I'm speaking fast. When I was at Northwest Junior High speaking with their PTO, they told us that they don't allow all the kids that qualify for seminar to be in seminar because they don't have enough seats. So,
To my knowledge, we have more students who are eligible than who actually registered to enroll.
so it's not that they're turned away.
Correct. If everyone enrolled, we would be at a situation wondering where would we have enough seats. But up to this point, that hasn't happened to my knowledge, and I monitor it on a trimester basis every year.
So I was going to say that would be like a violation of law, right? We're required to provide these services.
It goes back to that clause in Iowa code. If more students are eligible, then you can accommodate, you determine who can receive the services, who most needs the services. We haven't been at that point yet.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Next item on the agenda is academic achievement data.
Kim, are you doing that? Will you click on the one that says Student Achievement Action Plan? Is this the one you really wanted us to speak to?
Start here.
Yeah. So as we went through the fall with the board reports and talked to the equity committee, we've got a couple of different handouts sitting in there. One thing that kind of resonates with us is our populations that are consistently underperforming when we look through our student achievement data. I think it was Chris who had the idea of, do you want to speak to all those different things? I think we were sharing different things that we were doing, but could you kind of encapsulate that within those areas? And so this document really provides a look at those kinds of things that we're doing for those specific populations to help with, to bolster student achievement.
So we weren't quite sure where you wanted to take the conversation on this one. Like Amy said, these were really our opportunity areas when we tried to tease out the data and essentially identify where our gaps were. And we tried to line up, okay, what are all the things we're doing in those areas to account for those, each of those things intentionally, because we know that some of the work obviously complements. If teachers are trained in SIOP, we know that's going to reach students in special education and from a cultural perspective as well as if they're acquiring language. So some of them aren't as clean as just fitting in that column, but at the same time, we thought it kind of was some due diligence perspective to say, okay, how are we accounting for each of these maybe opportunities in our learning gaps intentionally in our system? And we do have a lot going on, which also begs the question, what are we doing really well out of that group too, right? And that's the work for us, is trying to focus our PD time and our teachers' time on what are the high impact strategies and how do we make sure we're investing time and energy into those and not spreading ourselves across too many different categories, but we can tell it's all important work and it'd be hard to rank one of those as less important than another. So
Yeah, if we get into the details, we'd be here all night, but I personally, I just thought this was the best summary I've ever seen, where you're getting like real clear, here's what we're doing special ed, here's what we're doing ELL, free reduced lunch, or here's what we're doing across the board. So, I mean, Matt, I agree. Let the debate begin on what's the most valuable, or are we focused enough, or is there enough on the page? But I just thought it was a great summary. And linking it to our strategic plan. Now, when we go through the rest of the data, all the rest of the data tells us focus on your opportunity. Whether you call them at-risk groups or opportunity groups, focus on your opportunity groups, right? So what are we doing to really help our free and reduced lunch kids that, I mean, and to me, this gets real clear. Here's what we're doing specifically for them, and here's what we're doing overall. And whether it's adding hours to the school year, or discretionary busing, or, you know, the multi-tiered support, or the RAM, man, I think I could just be real clear, and I think this is great. Here's the 10 or 15 things we're doing for this opportunity group.
And if you like this approach, I think what we could do when we talk strategic plan, link it to that. I mean, we could get even more detailed on here and try to link up, you know, kind of secondary progress, elementary progress on some of those pieces. You know, this is a pretty broad brushstroke of what those things are. I mean, there could be a lot of explanation or measures in there. It also goes to your point about, you know, when you try to evaluate the impact something's having, you can tell why that's also a little bit complicated too, right? Because of so many of those things crossing those areas about how do we know which of those things has been the huge lever, but that's part of our job to figure out.
So how will we know that it's working?
That's kind of the challenge I was just explaining, right? Is that, so how do you know which one of those
that's
things
what I'm
is
saying.
moving
I'm
the
like,
needle?
this is beautiful,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
This is a lot of stuff, but if we still shake out the bottom and we got the same result,
No, it should close the gap, yeah.
we're making assumptions, right? Because of course we want to do good work. I'm not taking away from y'all work, right? I'm just being clear. But when we shake this out, are we going to still have the same results for our Latino and our Black students?
Better not.
Well, I think an interesting thing would be to say how many of those things would have made the list 10 years ago that we were even doing,
probably
right?
not,
And
probably
so
not.
we go after those things and we implement those things because the research base tells us those are the best things you should be doing for high impact. So if we implement those things, like you said, I mean, we should see those things continue to work. Now to say which of them is more successful than another, I think is challenging, but 10 years ago, I don't think you would have seen a list of those things.
It may be worth the exercise.
My question is, if we know our Black and Latino students are struggling the most, especially if they're free and reduced lunch. I mean, basically, if we go back, we know that even if you're not free and reduced lunch, we know our Black students are not doing as well. So my question is, are any of these things that we are specifically doing this kind of overarching field specifically targeted for African American Latino students?
I think the cultural and equity approaches you would see there, I think those are what we're directly targeting.
But the cultural and
for those
equity
subgroups.
approaches that we are doing here are not specific to African American and Latino students. When we're cultural and equity approaches are looking at something different, right, about the type of things that we're starting, making sure that that's not the same thing as targeting those students. At least that's my understanding of cultural and equity approaches. Because we can talk about cultural competence and how we roll that out, right? That's like a learning thing. You can have these committees. Abbott might be a little bit more targeted towards that. Equity Advisory Committee, I guess, we're doing some stuff. But I'm just saying, and then we have these other groups and stuff, but like none of them are specifically focused towards those two groups that are struggling.
I think the
most.
implicit bias training, particularly in the one that we have had this year, you know, we are, through our CSIP, we're setting some goals around equity, but specifically we're talking about African Americans during those trainings. Right now we're moving into kind of a problem of practice, and so we are focused on race there.
Yeah, but implicit bias is more talking about our own implicit biases, right? That we have as an individual and how they've been translated to the classroom, which can interrupt our kids from learning well if we have these kind of biases about African American children and their ability to learn. But if we do all of this and that's the only one targeted towards our most vulnerable, that's what I'm trying to dig down into it. If implicit bias, which is specifically going to our teachers over 3 years, is to say, hey, you know, you probably shouldn't discriminate against that kid because he got more melanin. And then we have all these other pieces. What I'm saying is when we shake this out, it's a likelihood that it can look the same. I'm not saying that it will.
It won't.
But I'm just saying it's likely. I'm gonna live in reality right now. I've been in Iowa for a long time, and we have a beautiful cycle that we have established. And I also know that it takes 3 years to get good results when you're implementing something. I'm not crazy. I know that. But I'm just saying, we're not targeting those kids.
So how would
I
that
think we
look
are.
to you, Latasha, I guess? So if you're talking about targeting something at African American or Hispanic Latino students, what would that look like in comparison to what we're showing there?
I'm just saying, I'm saying some of these things, when you go back and you look at the fidelity of these models, they say that these things specifically work really well for these age groups and these groups, right? So I'm just saying, out of the ones that we have, when we're going back to the fidelity of that model, which ones are saying that these will specifically help this population? Because I don't know if the implicit bias will necessarily do that. Because implicit bias, the way that that's rolled out nationally, that's for white folks to think about that stuff. Which is great, which is important, right? But I'm trying to think about the kids on this level. Yes, I do want our teachers to have less bias, regardless of how much a kid makes, what they look like, etc. But when we dig down to that, to these specific models that we're having, that we're spending an incredible amount of money on, are we targeting the group that is still at the bottom, or will they still be at the bottom?
I want to just clear something up, and I want us to be extremely careful even about the implicit bias training. It's not just for the white folks, it's for all of us.
Well, it is.
To think about.
Thank you.
It's for all of us to think about. And thinking about your question, looking at the things that are on this list, what they're going to do to start to turn the tide. So is there anything that I can pinpoint on here that's going to say, next year, we're going to see a 10% jump in Iowa achievement scores for our black and brown babies? The answer is no. But when we start to just reapproach or just take another look at how we are teaching, the implicit bias is huge, because as an individual classroom teacher, I can impact the 30 in my sphere of influence, and I can start to think about how I'm doing, thereby, affecting change on a school-wide basis, especially if the teachers are getting it, the principals are getting it, central administration is getting it. Then that can start to be a priority so that we can start asking other questions, because this has impacts on how now we are thinking about identifying gifted education. So although it is, again, my analogy of how do you eat an elephant, you take one bite at a time, this is, I think, essentially a pretty nice chunk, but specifically targeting, I think I would pinpoint AVID because that has the most potential to do that, but I want to be very, very careful about some of these system-wide things. We're undoing a lot of years of a lot of stuff. And so cultural competency, I'm so excited about that work because it's targeting pedagogy. How we're teaching the students in our class looks differently now. Implicit bias, so not only am I changing the way I'm teaching, I'm thinking about and interrupting some unconscious things that have been happening for many years. So I think coupled all of these things stacked up together, I think we're going to see definitely student climate's data will be impacted. Definitely achievement data, I think we can argue, because to be quite honest, that tool is broken. So I don't know that we're going to see movement on that until we really start thinking about and considering some biases in the measurement. Sometimes we're using a ruler to measure a football field, and I don't want to, I don't want us to think because these things, we're not seeing achievement data move, then these things aren't effective, because that is totally opposite. So I think mindset, a lot of these things are getting at the mindset and interrupting how I have traditionally done things. I want to be very, very careful about some of that.
I mean, I'm just posing a question. I really am, because, we have to think, that's a part of the implicit bias in the cultural competence. Like, what are we really, that's the question, right? Like, what are we doing here that we know is going to reach those kids? I'm just asking the question as like an equity piece. Like, we can do these pieces, but are they together or one piece? Specifically going back to those models that we're implementing, we can look at it and say, we know that AVID has shown that with black and brown kids, but I'm just asking. I know, I apologize if anybody's offended, sort of. Because I'm asking that question because I think it's an important question to ask.
No, it absolutely is, and we have to ask it.
And not to offend, because this is a ton of work, so I'm just going, this is a lot, but are we making sure that all this work that we're doing is going to get at that we want all of our kids to do better, is my question that I'm asking. And so I'm just saying, like, do we want to spin our wheels on these 40 things if 10 of them are really sharp and that can really help us, is what I'm saying. But it's hard to dig that out because we're doing 40 things. So.
I'd just like to ask in the final column, one of the things that we've been taking that critical eye, perhaps maybe not making as much headway as we'd like, is making sure that our building teachers and district administrators and so on and so forth are reflective of our students. And I mean, am I missing where that's reflected on here as far as, or is this more the
teaching and learning perspective?
Okay.
What we can do, I mean, getting those teachers into those classrooms is a part of the equity plan.
Okay.
So this was more.
I just think of
focused
it,
on the teaching and learning.
you know, Chris
aspect.
referred to it as kind of a summary of,
Yeah.
you know, here's what we're doing for this, and I was just want to make sure that we don't forget that piece, because we got a ways to go on that.
I like to push. My only reaction was, I expect significant change. Period. And I like the idea of perhaps getting, maybe it's not on, maybe you want to have a clean copy that's simple, and then a copy with, when did we start these? Like they added 50 hours, you got the year there, but maybe we just want to say when we started it or ended it, or, now some of them are hard, like SciAp, we did a late model and it's progressed, but like RAM, if we're 3 years in the RAM and we haven't seen a difference,
Right.
Right.
or 5 years in the RAM, so we may want to date a few of these things to say when they started. Because I agree with the point, if all this crap is the same stuff we've done over and over, then it's not going to work. But I see a lot of new things up here that are very different, and that's what gets me excited about it.
Well, like Amber said, I think critically thinking about what our measures are, right? I mean, how are we evaluating those things? So if the board wanted to evaluate RAM, what are those measurables you're going to look at for that? And, you know, you can't always just go to necessarily an assessment. There might be some other measurables to show success, and there might be multiple pieces you want to use.
Well, I'm just going on what we've heard from teachers already, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
But do we have measurables for these different things that we're implementing?
Well, right now some of them yes, some of them probably not. You know, we haven't looked at measurables on those. I think when you talk about teacher professional development, you know, we could have surveys or anecdotal data from teachers, but then impact into the students. You know, do we start to look at climate surveys and things like that to see what is the impact 5 years from completing the training with staff? You know, so I think there'd be different things you could link up to those, and we can certainly do that as a next step to say what are suggested measurables we could look at for
I
those.
just think that it just
Yeah.
may help in being able to, because it might be one thing that might hit, you know, the climate survey could hit like 7 things on here or something.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yep.
I think it just will be helpful to have measurables, because we can have RAM in and we're like, sounds good, everybody feels great, you know, but is it doing what it is that we want it to do? Right? So we have some intentions about why we're doing it, but then we need to make sure that we know if it's doing what we want it to do is a good question, because that also will help us because that's sometimes what we don't do, right? And so then we go back, we're like, we think it works. It sounds like it. The teacher said it was good, but then we have different things in different buildings, so that might be helpful.
I'll give you one measure I expect. I mean, other than all achievement going up, and Dan will love this because she's a data nerd, self-declared data nerd. But when we do, like, for example,
Queen, but that's all right.
all right, data queen. When we do like FRL versus our schools, this goes back to the David Duty study, right? There was a slope, very clear correlation. FRL to schools. I expect that slope to change over time. Now, when you look at the overall performance of the district, you can get lost in the data, right? But that slope, to me, is the number one thing that probably needs to change, and whether it's by students or schools or whatever, that's just the data we got. So how do we measure that and look at that year by year to see that slope change? And that would start to say that some of these things in the free or reduce are working. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to leave this negative. I think this is the best summer we've ever seen. We're just continuing to sharpen the saw on how do we
Continue to
get
flesh it out
how do we get after
start
it.
including some of those pieces we talked about. So, like you said, maybe a page keeps it simple, and then a page that dives into some more of the details.
Gives us a little, so we can look back at it and go, oh yeah, this started 5 years ago, obviously it's not working, or it is.
With those measurables, I mean, right now, we could throw the kitchen sink at it to see what sticks, what works, but making sure that those measurables actually reflect, because we can't use Iowa assessment data to see if implicit bias training is working. So I think we, maybe even as a district, have to go back and say, this is what would measure.
Survey, soft stuff.
That challenge to isolate any one of those variables is extremely hard, and if over time we pulled something away, it would be interesting to see if our data then dipped as well, because maybe what we're doing is also helping us sustain what we're seeing.
But you got the testimonials on some of these too. I'd put pen to paper and put them in a case study so you got them. All right, data. Is there any data we want to go through? Got a bunch of data. Why don't you bring up one of them?
Some of those.
Why don't you just bring, or Kim, why don't you bring up one
Yeah,
of them?
Kim's got them over there.
God, we trust all the rest bring data.
Anyone in particular you want to bring up?
Just 3 to 5, I'll with that, whatever.
Just one of the things I wanted
How
to,
about the QEC?
Yeah.
if I could just comment on one thing back on this slide, just real quick, is that,
It's
you
the
know,
first one.
this is a bit of a,
Close that. Sorry, Brian.
we had a pretty spirited discussion at Policy and Governance, kind of around the same topic, like what we're doing, is it working, is it going to work? And a lot of these initiatives here, whether it's weighted resource allocation or, even with there's various things that we've done to try and level the playing field and try and help our kids with the most opportunity gaps move ahead. And one of the things that we talked about, and I think we'll probably be talking about maybe as a board more, is that we've put a lot of this stuff into policy now. And I think there will come a point in time where, a future board may go, well, when, like you said, Chris, when did this start? Has it made a difference? But I think one of the differences, and I think this is important because words are important, is that if it's in policy, it can't be ignored and it can't be forgotten. And somebody's going to have to come around and undo that policy and have a darn good reason for it in the future. So I hope that we see the type of gains that we're hoping to see. But I agree with Director Deloach that, hey, we got to see some change for the good here. So
this was a QEC approach, right? Quality Evolution Chart. So I think at the Equity Committee, I forget, it was in the fall, maybe November. That data that was up there for a second, brought that data and some charts. And I guess what I pushed on was, okay, break it down for me, man. I want to see a gap analysis basically on where the opportunity's at. And the only thing I wanted to get out of this was when you really look at where the opportunity's at. So this was an example of a grade 3 to 5 black reading proficiency, right? 50%. So it's 50-50 or 50% proficient, 50% are non-proficient. 95% of the opportunity, or if you took that 50%, 47% of the opportunity is in our at-risk groups. Again, it's really driven by IEP, ELL, and FRL. And then the not at risk, it's important, we need to keep after that, but it's more like 5% of the opportunity. Again, for me, this was just a strong indication that we're on the right path when we're doing stuff like weighted resource model, when we're doing stuff like expanding ELL. I think our focus on at-risk or opportunity is absolutely right. And just from a pure math standpoint, it will deliver the biggest amount of the opportunity, just because the math doesn't lie. I mean, the math is the math. And when you break down the math, that's where the biggest opportunity is. Now, we need to do it all. But again, I just want to reemphasize the focus on our opportunity groups is going to drive 95% of the opportunity. We're either going to succeed or fail there, I guess is the way to say it. And it was true of every single grade level. Basically, it came to the same conclusion. I don't know if there's any other data you want to go through, but you get like this bazillion, all this data, and how you break it down, and to me, that's how you break it down. And you don't need to go very far to see we're on the right track with what the summary you just shared. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Aligning program to need.
To the opportunity, yeah. Putting your resources against the opportunity, and then this just tells you that based on what we're doing, we should see a difference. If we don't, there's a big problem. Anyway. Anything else on that one? Can't wait what the data queen brings us next. I'm kind of excited about that myself.
it is nicer than
My
ever.
software for your correlation.
Hey, those your words. All right, anything else on this one? Agenda setting? For the next April. for, we can see as it comes up in board meetings.
Yeah, I think,
I mean, AVID was one I think we were interested in. I think we had that on the parking lot if
and there was
nothing
something else
else.
that we were trying to identify today, and I can't remember what it was. That we thought might have been parked out there.
So we can continue to talk to some in agenda setting, but we'll pencil AVID in. I think we've already done that.
Bar at risk. Services we provide for.
I was gonna ask about ELL.
Or what?
What did we do with ELL?
What do you mean, Oh, wasn't that long ago.
We get bus spring
Yeah,
at Alexander.
that's right.
AVID and at-risk services. We try to keep it to 2 topics, so.
God, that was a while.
Anything else for tonight? Entertain a motion to adjourn. It's only 4 hours, 5.
So moved.
Phil's got the motion.
Second.
Brian's got the, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting's adjourned.
Oh, that's right. I remember we also did PE at that meeting,
Yeah.
too, didn't we?
Yeah.